Greetings from Silicon Valley. My name is William Santana Lee. I'm the chairman and CEO of Knightscope, and I have beat the often path by financing a company in a very, very unique way. We raised over $120 million from 35,000 investors just before the public listing on NASDAQ. So it's been a long, long road.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we showcase unusual success stories to help you think outside the box in your life and your career. Well, we've got a crazy one for you this week, folks. William Santana Lee is here, and he is quite the remarkable individual. Through incredible grit and determination, he rose through the ranks of the Ford Motor Company to become the youngest senior executive at the company at the age of 28. He was given a $250 million budget to build a Ford subsidiary called Greenleaf LLC, which led to him getting bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. He was recruited by SoftBank Venture Capital, made famous recently by WeWork and the show We Crashed, and funded or worked on a series of startups before landing on his current startup, Knightscope. Now, Knightscope is now officially a publicly traded company that previously raised millions and millions in funding and makes autonomous security robots in Silicon Valley to assist with security and law enforcement around the country. Needless to say, in this episode, I'm about to get schooled. I'm pleased to announce William Santana Lee. Unbelievable. Well, that is an incredible pedigree. I'm blown away. Thank you so much for joining me here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on board. And I'm so curious to learn about not only the product that you've launched, but also your history and how you ended up getting here. So welcome.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. It's my absolute pleasure. So give us a little bit of a background. What is the product? What is the company in a nutshell?
So we build autonomous security robots. They're a unique combination of four critical technologies that are extremely, really difficult unto themselves. We've decided to make it harder and just combine all of them.
Okay.
So we've got self-driving autonomous technology, like a self-driving car, robotics, artificial intelligence, and electric vehicles. And they're intended to provide officers and guards really smart eyes and ears for them to do their jobs much more effectively.
Incredible. And they look outstanding. They look like something. Have you seen the movie WALL-E?
Never heard of it. No idea what you're talking about.
No idea. I assume that's being facetious, but that's okay. They look very futuristic. Look like almost like rocket ships, I want to say. What was the design inspiration for these devices?
We're on a very not tenuous, but there's a fine line. These robots are not on the battlefield. They're not for military use. So we operate in society. We hold contracts from Hawaii through Texas to North Carolina, running 24/7. So we're actually in the community. So we needed something that had enough of an intrigue, enough of a design element to bring the kid out of everyone. It's like, oh wow, there's like the thing that was on the science fiction movie screen is now down right in front of me. But because of the mission of, long-term mission to see if we can make the U.S. the safest country in the world, you need a little bit of physical deterrence, a physical presence, a minor level of intimidation so that you're like, maybe I shouldn't do X negative behavior I was contemplating doing. So it's not that fine line, right? You need to scare away a criminal, but you can't scare away the kid or grandma. That was the fine line.
So that was the motivation. Okay. So before we jump into the company itself and the new product, could you tell us a little bit about your career arc? Because you've had a very fascinating career. So what did you do before you started this? And give us an overview.
By way of background, I'm an ex-automotive executive. I spent 10 years in Detroit at Ford Motor Company, 12 different jobs, actually on 4 different continents, every functional area. Ford was an awesome training ground. So if you go on my LinkedIn profile during those years, I look unemployable because basically every 6 months or 12 months, I've got a new job. And I had a wonderful opportunity to, work on, I'm going to date myself here. I worked on the 6.8 liter V10 engine ignition system. I worked on the Escort Tracer team with Mazda. I was the vehicle engineer for the Lincoln Mark 8. Worked for Ford of Europe, for Ford of Brazil, for Ford of India. worked on some manufacturing rationalization, helped build some new plants. My second to last job, I was director of mergers and acquisitions, as I like to say when we're running around buying everything. My last job, ill-advised, I was an entrepreneur. I helped build a company for Ford Motor Company. The board had released $250 million to me to do a roll-up in the used parts industry. And I bought 22 companies in 11 months. Had about 600 employees, doing about 150 million in sales. And at the age of 28, you're able to do that. You get that entrepreneurial bug. That's kind of puts a little perspective of kind of where I come from.
So as you moved your way through, was it apparent to you at a young age? Were you always excelling at things you were doing, acing every test? Was school a breeze? Because to advance so far so quickly obviously is an anomaly.
I did reasonably well in high school, less so in college, probably because I was trying to do too much and trying to get out of there quick. Yeah, there's always been that drive. So for those that have a screw loose and maybe are still in Corporateville, one of the reasons I was able to advance quickly at Ford Motor Company was one really bad attitude / trait that I had at the time, which was I'm going to do two things. One, I am going to attempt to do my boss's job and make sure I'm always 3 steps ahead of everybody, which is hard to do, but it's doable. The other was I was really aggressive in terms of trying to move the company as fast as possible. And so I had this really bad attitude of, okay, are they going to promote me today or are you going to fire me today? Like, I'm going to push that hard every single day. A couple of times I almost did get fired, so not a good idea. But I was really, pushing everyone to try a lot harder and push a lot harder and think out of the box and the like. And fortunately, I was lucky to have enough of a support from the top to be able to do those kinds of things. But there's some hairy situations in there too.
Nice. Well, I love that you bring a different perspective to things, because a lot of people, when they make a decision to set out on their own, we've had a lot of people who are a cog in the corporate machine and then just bailed, or they said, I don't want to deal with this. But you made it so far, and that's interesting that you made it so far, because ostensibly you could have stayed on that path, presumably, for a very long time. And you said at some point, I got to do something else. I got to build my own thing. So what was the fire that led to you doing that, to realizing that you were better off taking the 5% chance on something new?
I think 2 things happened at roughly the same time that drove me to do that. I think one was Greenleaf was the company that I had built. And just that gave you the entrepreneurial bug. I have my own board, my own HR, my own treasury, my own everything. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to go be a vehicle line director on, XYZ new car line or vehicle line. It's like, I don't know. I think second was just the numbers on the board. I think if I total it up, I had saved the company a couple $1 billion over a few years.
Wow.
And I'm looking at my paycheck and it kept going up and obviously kept getting promoted and double promoted, and they're all very gracious and nice, but the mechanics are like, I can keep saving folks a couple $1 billion or keep building stuff and creating a bunch of shareholder value, but where's my equity, meaningful equity, not just normal corporate stock options. And so I think those 2 things combined. And then maybe lastly is maybe less, less gracious. The more time I spent with the senior levels that I frankly used to look up to a lot, then I started realizing that they, don't actually do work. Like, you're going from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting, and you're parroting what happened in the next thing. No one wants to make a decision. I mean, it was a little demotivating. It's like, you have all this authority, right? And a lot of smart people, a lot of bright people, but you get up into those echelons, and sometimes, you get into the massive bureaucracy where well-meaning people want to do massive things and they can't, not allowed, or have lost the lust and the fire. So maybe those three things combined.
So the legends are true, is what you're saying in a nutshell.
I mean, there's a couple of things that I really sorely miss. And I don't say this in jest. A couple of jobs I used to have there, I would lose $1 billion in rounding. Like $1 billion in the real world, when you need to go raise it to go build your own company or what have you, is, a really tall task. So having that almost not discretionary and unlimited resources, but at times it felt that way. It's like, Jesus, we can move a mountain here real quick. So I missed that. And the other thing I really missed was I got senior enough that they gave me a badge that would allow me to get into every advanced design studio.
Whoa.
And I always love to think and dream about the future. And so, every couple of weeks when I probably had a bad day, it's like, okay, let me just go take an hour break and just walk around all the studios and kind of see what's brewing for next year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years. I miss that, the smell of clay. There used to be a chief designer there who is Italian and would be singing at the top of his lungs as you're walking through this massive studio.
Like Ford versus Ferrari, right?
It was
the movie.
It was invigorating.
You gotta bring it up, yeah.
It was invigorating, and I missed that sorely. But the rest, the auto industry hasn't changed materially, except for what Elon's done, which I have massive respect for. And it'll be interesting what happens over the next couple of decades. I'll place a bet there's a bunch of major automakers that are not going to make it.
So doing that, managing those projects, when did the decision come and how did you go about making the transition into doing your own thing? Was it something that you were building slowly over time, mulling over? Was it a sudden decision? How did that transition happen?
Semi-sudden. I think, bunch of silly internal political things happened at Ford during this period. And so somehow I ended up making the corporate announcement for what we were doing with Greenleaf. So over a couple, weeks, I got media training, print, radio, TV, Scrum, put, 20 microphones in front of me, go. And somehow I ended up doing the announcement, which was a crazy thing to be doing. I moved the stock $1 that day, and it's like, this is insane. And at the same time, it was right during the .com, bubble craziness. And so I got recruited by a venture capital firm to come help a startup, basically. And that's basically what happened was, that experience plus, all kinds of craziness happening out here in Silicon Valley. And then my desire just career-wise, okay, well, maybe I'll give this a shot. Was interesting.
That's so cool. And you're out in Silicon Valley now, so you must have enjoyed California. The transition suited you well, I assume.
Not so bad. I'm allergic to snow now, but yes.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm in LA. It's so hot right now. It's 95 degrees right now. It's super hot. We're going to run out of water, but that's a different question altogether. But it is beautiful out here. So you're doing VC. You're experiencing the startup life. You're trying that. What were some of the observations that you had from your early days in the startup world? Pros and cons.
Pros. It's literally pay for performance. And, you screw up, you'll get real immediate feedback, real quick, the next day. It's not, some funded R&D project that you're sitting around for 5 years working on. And it's I wonder if anybody will want this. You're on the edge. You got everything on the mat and you're live or die by your decisions, and you screw up, you're going to feel it. It's going to hurt. I think the camaraderie, the band of bandits, a bunch of crazy folks that, you recruit one nutcase and then you get another nutcase and then you got a room full of nutcases and okay, let's go change the world. I mean, it was fun. that first year, I remember, part of it is the workload level. If you work, 18 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week for 11 months in a row, like, you're gonna have some negative health consequences. So the negative parts can, taxing on your, physical health, your emotional health, psychological, everything. I think the other was just how financings get done outside of corporateville. Not always in the best interest of the founder and entrepreneur. It's actually a pretty screwed up process.
Yeah.
And now I have unfortunately done, not proud to say, I've done more financial engineering than actual engineering, which is not good. But in order to get done what I wanted to get done, I kind of had to do that. But the way innovation and startups and financing's done is broken and certainly bordering on unprofessional in a lot of cases.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What do you think is broken about it?
Uh-oh. Now you're going to get me in trouble.
Feel free to not answer if you don't want to. I should preface the question by saying this. A lot of people see that kind of financing, especially people who are entrepreneurially minded, as some sort of holy grail, right? VC is what so many people are looking for, what they dream of. They dream of that multi-million-dollar cash injection into their idea. So to hear that there might be a flaw with the model might be interesting for some folks. But if you don't want to get into it, just say next question.
I will. I mean, I've been public about this before. It's just it is a hot button for me. So if I start ranting and raving, like hit the pause button. It's fine.
All right. Well, fast forward.
So basically, there's a time and place for venture capital. So a few issues. One, and this changes widely, but crudely speaking, about $130 billion goes into startups every year. About 80% into software, 10% into biotech, and then 10% into other. Do you think that the economy is 80% software? No, it's not reality. So then a lot of bad stuff starts happening, right? Things that should be funded for society's benefit, still could be lucrative or what have you, end up not getting funding because everyone's just trying to, let's do the easiest thing. Let's come up with an app and, we'll be able to, 5x, 10x our money and out we go. So, we didn't put these people in charge as to what should get funded in the economy. So it's flawed in that regard. And then there's the one that really ticks me off is like hardware is hard. Okay, 80% of you are dumping everything in software. You're ex-software, ex-finance people. Like that's almost like saying a bunch of lawyers got together and decided to start a hospital, and they're like, "Man, surgery's like really hard."
It's
like
really
you
tough.
have no freaking clue what you're talking about, and then you're gonna, tell a bunch of entrepreneurs you shouldn't do that because it's hard. It's no, you have no sector expertise, so maybe you should keep your mouth shut. I think the other problem is just compare it to the public markets. So if someone buys 5% of your shares in the public markets, what happens? Emergency meeting. There's an activist single shareholder, you can figure out the acronym, at the front door. And emergency board meeting, call the crisis communications folks, we need to put a plan together. There's, a problem. But somehow in the private sector, some VC comes along and buys 20% of your company, steals 2 board seats, and somehow the CEO sends out a celebratory press release the next day is beyond me. Again, there's a time and place for VCs, so let me be a little bit more finer point. Let's just say you and I, Ross, we're going to make a social media app. Like, we're going to quit our jobs. We're going to go work on that.
Done. And
Mark Zuckerberg had retired, and 6 of his partners got together that are all ex-Facebook, maybe some ex-Twitter people, and some ex-LinkedIn people, and they started a fund to fund new social media apps. and Mark shows up with a $5 million term sheet and says, I want 2 board seats, and we're going to help you grow this company. Like, you should just do the deal. Like, it's fine. But in most cases, that is not the case. Innovation, everyone's looking for the 10x return. Like, you have to be out of spec, right? You want the outsized returns, the not normal stuff. But the founder should look like this. They should have this experience. You should have this amount of revenue, this amount of EBITDA, and this amount, and they should be located in this location. But other than that recipe, it needs to yield returns that are out here somewhere. Like, I've never seen so many bright people act so stupid in my life. Like, you want a recipe for what you're doing, but you want the outcome to be outside of the formula. Like, kind of doesn't work. So,
right.
In our case, name me the fund, name me the general partner that's fluent in law enforcement, physical security, robotics, and hardware, and we should pay a premium for their capital. Not going to work. So, what ended up happening with us when we started the company, Knightscope, in 2013 was, hey, Bill, you're out of your mind. This will never work. It's hardware and it's software. You should pick one. And physical security is not an investment thesis. You need to go away, right? So it's really important for founders and entrepreneurs to pick something that they really love and you're willing to go to the mat for it. Because if you get a year worth of earful of no, 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 and no, well, what are you going to do about it? And that, leads you to start thinking about other ways to force what needs to get done to get done.
Well, that brings up a fascinating point. I love the point in life, and one of my big theses in general, and the reason why I do this show, I love when people make a decision that goes against what the world around them is telling them. I find that to be such a fascinating thing when all of these voices are saying do one thing and somebody does another thing.
Ross is where we started. You got to have a screw loose.
Yeah, but it's something more than that. I mean, you're not giving yourself enough credit, I don't think. Although that is true. For sure you have to have a screw loose. But what was it about this idea? Knowing what you knew, so having that experience for an extended period of time, both at a major corporation and then in the startup world, seeing what they value, understanding, okay, 80% of the companies are software, 10% is biotech. You had an inside look at that formula that you just described, at the playbook. And you said, okay, I've been studying this. I'm going to choose to do something else in this field. Why?
Primarily 2 things. So spending my time in Detroit and then seeing the advent and the promise of autonomous self-driving technology, I'm like, wow, this is going to turn the multi-trillion-dollar auto industry completely upside down. I don't necessarily agree with the path that everyone's taken to commercialize the technology, but that is profoundly interesting for me. And then second, I was born in New York City. Someone hit my town on 9/11, and I am still profoundly pissed off about it and have dedicated the rest of my life to better securing our country. So when you're willing to take a 2, 3, 4 decade view on something and stick to it, like you're going to do irrational, illogical, and sometimes stupid things to make sure to force the outcome that you want to happen. I mean, you look at the country, the first role of government is what? To protect its citizens. I don't believe the founders of our country would ever expected us to build a society where going to work, going to school, or going to a movie theater literally came with the risk of being shot or killed. Like, that is not acceptable. But our society experiences over a $2 trillion negative economic impact of crime and terrorism every single year.
Wow.
The country's over 200 years old. We're on our 46th president, and no one's fixed this freaking problem.
Yeah.
Like, I think we should try to give it a shot. And, I think it'll be some of our teammates' life's best work. That you can get up every morning and have the honor and privilege to try to help a society and try to fix a really, really hard problem. is worth the pain and suffering.
Well, I think that brings up a good point, in that it's not just that you have a screw loose, but I like the idea that you've been marinating on something, that you were passionate about this thing for, like you said, decades, because it sounds to me like what you're describing with the problem with VC in Silicon Valley and startups in general is that very few people, or perhaps not enough people, are taking a step back and asking themselves questions like, what is the point of all of this? Or what is it for? And if the what is the point is just to get these insane multiples and returns on investment, that might not be a good enough point when you're thinking, but hey, we've got this very real issue of security. We've got this very real issue of people not feeling safe going to a movie theater.
I mean, one of the triggers, catalysts was Sandy Hook. And right after that, frankly, a bunch of VCs did get together, made a bunch of press releases. We're going to go try to fix this and all this other stuff. Where are you? Right? And then, we reach out, and then it's like, yeah, we don't invest in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you go in public at a time of crisis, you make a commitment, and you don't have the stamina to follow through.
Ouch.
Like,
your product as it is today, 9 years in, what does your product do? What are the capabilities of your product literally right at this very second? You have several models.
Ross, I practice. This is very important, so everyone's got to listen up.
Yep.
The robots are here to kill everyone and take everyone's job. That's basically what we've developed over the last 9 years, and I hope that ends the podcast there.
Can they take my job first?
Sure. There's going to be a new robot just for podcasts. It's going to be really good.
Good. Thank you. I need it.
No, so the robots are here to help. And they do basically two things. One less obvious than the other. So the more obvious one is they gather over 90 terabytes of data a year that allow an officer and guard to have unprecedented situational awareness. So they have their eyes, ears, and voice on the ground in multiple locations at the same time. So that can be very, very powerful. The second thing is maybe less obvious, is for those that don't spend a lot of time in law enforcement or security, is just the physical deterrence. So if I put a police car in front of your home marked, criminal behavior will change, right? Similarly, if you walk into, you want to go steal a car at 3 o'clock in the morning at a hospital, and you see a 5 foot tall, 400-pound machine roaming around, there's no one around, it's not being remote controlled, I don't see anybody, the strobe light's going, it says police or security on the side, it's making some sounds, like, I don't know what this thing does, but I think I'll not steal a car tonight or do it somewhere else. And just being there changes the dynamic dramatically. And for those of you that haven't seen the technology, just go to Knightscope.com, go to the crime page, and there's a long list of all the positive things that the robots have already done for society. And honestly, we're just getting going.
Mm-hmm. I think, and I'm sure you've addressed, like you said, you've done hundreds of interviews, you've addressed this question thousands of times, no doubt. But people have a natural fear. When you mention things like AI and robotics and law enforcement, there's a big fear, because it's, how do we know who's controlling these things, what they're controlling? Data privacy remains a very big concern, hot button issue at the moment. What assurances do you have for people that it's not just collecting and eroding their privacy, collecting their data and selling it and all of those types of things?
So you can take my word for it. In a lot of cases, that won't be good enough. So we just did it contractually. Very simple. Every contract, it's legally stated. So the actual security data is owned by the client, not by us. And that's contractual and legally spelled out. That's the first thing to think about. The second thing to think about is we're operating in public environments. The concept of privacy kind of doesn't exist. Like, we're not in someone's conference room or restroom or hotel room. It's kind of not exactly a good comparison or understanding. And I think third, go look up the FBI crime clock and then be horrified to see that every few seconds some awful crime is occurring in the U.S. somewhere. And you'll start realizing when it comes close to home, a loved one, when it happens, then it's, where were you? Have you caught him yet? Do you have the evidence? Where's the footage? I thought you guys, and you can't have it both ways. You either decide that we're going to provide some tools for folks to be able to actually do their jobs. And, I think you as a citizen have a right to live in a safe country, in a safe community. And in order to do that, you kind of need some capabilities and tools. Otherwise, or as I like to tell investors, like, the market for crime is never going to collapse, right? You think 7 billion people are going to wake up tomorrow morning and all start behaving? But you got to be able to give the folks some capabilities again for them to do their actual jobs.
One quick question. So there's a lot of conventional advice. If you go on Twitter, Instagram, you get a lot of variations of the same piece of advice over and over again. What is something unconventional or that goes against the grain, something that you either believe or something that you took to heart from a mentor that you would say that very few other people believe or agree with?
I can't quantify it, but I believe in negative fuel, which is, when you're doing something a little bit different, there's so many naysayers, haters, rock throwers, people throwing banana peels, physically or online, and you've got to have a mechanism to deal with that. Because if not, you're gonna crumble. Like, I don't care if you're Mother Teresa or the Pope or some politician or actor or musician or whatever. Don't ever read the social media comments, right? Like, it's just horrifying things. No matter whatever you do, you just kind of don't read that. In some cases, you're not going to be able to get away with not dealing with something really negative. And you got to be able to turn that into fuel to drive what you're trying to get done. Like, just simple math, 1 out of 100 investors that you talk to, might actually write a check. I don't know if that's the right statistics, but, we closed 35,000 investors. Imagine how many people said, hey, you're a moron. This will never work. This is stupid. Hope you fail. All kinds of awful things. And so you got to be able to take the punch, get back up, dust yourself off, and back in the ring you go. And then you take that meeting that went really poorly and you go, yep, we'll see about that. And I don't know if that's a New Yorker in me or whatever, but it's like, we'll take a punch, but we're going to punch back really hard, and be able to power through it. And you kind of take that negativity and turn it into fuel for you to power through the rest of the night. Or it's 3:00 in the morning and you got to get something done. The auditors don't care, your lawyers don't care, your teammates may not care, your shareholders don't care, the media doesn't care. Like, sometimes your family either doesn't know or doesn't care. Like, you need to just power through it. And it can be a very lonely, position to be in. And you got to be able to deal with that negativity, otherwise it'll consume you.
One of the themes that I talk about over and over again is people who've gotten away from a path only to return to the path, and whether or not that's a part of it or not, a necessary step, if you will. So if you say, I've had this hunch for decades, I did something else, but I returned to something I always believed in. I'm very fascinated with those types of arcs.
Oh, I see. I don't know. I've been on the same path, like laser focused. I'm going to force this to happen. Like,
maybe you
that
don't
concept
fit that.
that doesn't work for me.
You're the outlier. Hey, that's okay too. It's all data points. It's all data points in the big scheme of life. And from what I gather, you are an outlier on almost every data point, which is clearly what has brought you to the level of success and achievement that you've been able to do, which is outstanding. So again, I'm humbled that you came.
I would applaud you
me.
there. I mean, we've had some moderate amount of success. We're just getting started. I have an unbelievable team that has kind of helped make all that happen, and some really hardworking folks that have put in the same level of dedication, literal blood, sweat, and tears and for unending years. And you got to be kind of relentless. And I realized I've been starting to draft the annual shareholder meeting stuff for now that we're publicly traded. Got to do all that good stuff. And just reflecting on my immediate team that works for me directly or with me, and it's I got lucky. I got surrounded by some unbelievable people that are have just as much a screw loose as I do.
Well, I can think of no better way to wrap it up than that. I wouldn't say that it's just luck in your case, but that's just an outside opinion. I recognize that you believe that. So I want you to have the final word here. So what would you like to say? Anything you want to promote? Obviously, we mentioned the website before, but the floor is yours to wrap up and close out this episode.
Hey, listen, Ross, I appreciate you having us. If you're fascinated about the technology, certainly go to Knightscope.com, go to the Roadshow page. We actually have this crazy robot aquarium that I call it. A bunch of robots running around the country that we've now done, I think, 36 stops where folks can come touch, see, feel, and see the robots. They're in DC this weekend. And we're making our way across the country. So if you'd like to see some autonomous security robots up close and get your obligatory robot selfie, be sure to stop by. On a more serious note, we're asking folks to support what we're doing. We have this little theme of long Knightscope and short the criminals. Like, we kind of need to have that level of support across the country if we're really going to achieve the mission. And this can't be just us here in Silicon Valley building some cool stuff. It's going to literally take a cross-section of the entire country to decide that we've had enough, stop arguing about the problems, and let's see if we can fix it. And we have something that can actually be super helpful. So we're very grateful for all the gracious support from all our supporters across the country. And like I always say, long Knightscope and short the criminals.
All right. And that's Knight with a K, KNIGHTSCOPE.com, Knightscope. Bill, thank you for joining me. And with that, the official podcast is over.